Good morning and welcome everyone to our League of Women Voters Voices of Kitsap webinar. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We've got a lot of attendees dropping in, so I'm going to give it just another minute or so. My name's Lenny Skarin, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters here in Kitsap County, and I'm also on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And we are the hosts for this webinar. And it looks like we've got about 50 people joining us already, so that's wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to do first a couple of housekeeping things. If you have questions after the presentation, I have a couple that I'm going to start with after Chairman Forsman's presentation, but put them in the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen. It's part of the Zoom bar. And we'll try to get to some of those at the end, but we'll see how it goes. We've got a lot of great information to share. So first of all, I want to again welcome everyone and say that the League of Women Voters was founded over 100 years ago in the days of the women's suffrage movement. The League of Women Voters of Kitsap is one of 21 local leagues in the state of Washington. We envision a democracy where everyone has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. We are nonpartisan, but we do conduct studies on vital issues of concern to members of the public. And after lengthy investigation of an issue and discussion through a consensus process with members, a policy position may be created by the national, the state, or a local league. The league welcomes people of all genders who are 16 years of age or older to join us. As part of our mission to empower voters and defend democracy, we hold free public education events on a wide variety of topics. The League of Women Voters is an organization fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and in practice. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to the organization's current and future success in engaging all individuals, households, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. The League of Women Voters here in Kitsap created Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee 6 years ago. And we've been conducting a series of webinars called the Voices of Kitsap County. Our intent is to present the many different voices in this county. And today we are really pleased to hear from Chairman Leonard Forsman, who represents one of the sovereign nations, the Suquamish tribe within our county. Honorable Leonard Forsman grew up in Suquamish on the Port Madison Indian Reservation and lives there today with his family. He has been tribal chairman for the Suquamish tribe since 2005 and has served on the tribal council for over 30 years. He is president of the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, Northwest Regional Vice President of the National Congress of American Indians, and currently serves on multiple tribal, intertribal, and intergovernmental boards and commissions, including the Kitsap County Regional Coordinating Council, the Friends of Waterfront Seattle, the Washington Indian Gaming Association, and the West Sound Partners for Ecosystem Recovery. President Barack Obama appointed him to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation as the Native American member in 2013 and vice chair in 2016. Governor Jay Inslee very recently named him to the Board of Regents for the University of Washington, where he earned his bachelor's degree in anthropology. He later earned a master's degree in historic preservation from Goucher College, I think I said that wrong, where he studied the relevance of the National Register of Historic Places to tribal cultural values systems. Prior to his tribal leadership, he worked as a professional archaeologist and is the former director of the Suquamish Museum. Leonard is active in the tribal canoe journey as a puller in the, I'm going to say this wrong, you'll have to correct me, Chairman Forsman, the Siamaoks voyaging canoe. The Potlatch Fund honored him with the Fran James Cultural Preservation Award in 2011. And I want to say, for those of you who haven't been there, the Suquamish Museum just celebrated its 40th anniversary with a wonderful event, which I was able to attend. If you missed it, too bad, but you can still go to the museum and see the wonderful exhibits there. So, Chairman Forsman, you want to open with a presentation and welcome us all to your land.
Oh, he's good. And Huxley Hill, everybody. Thanks for the long introduction. You didn't get the edited version of my bio, apparently. So when you hang around long enough and you say yes enough, I guess you end up with a long bio. But just great to be here and great opportunity to share some information and see some names, familiar names on the participant list. So good to see, well, not see everybody, but know you're here watching me present. So we're going to go ahead and do a little PowerPoint presentation here. Probably not little, but a PowerPoint presentation and do some background. Many of you already are familiar with this, but it's always good to refresh that in our minds. So Huxley Hill means welcome from the Suquamish tribe, and of course, we're very well known for Chief Seattle. Port Madison Indian Reservation, established by the Treaty of Point Elliott, 1855, with Suquamish and Duwamish people. Our early history, of course, here since the last ice age. And as we know, the Puget Sound was formed by a glacier or glaciers, and about 5,000 years ago, got close to its present sea level and established our traditional way of life, reliant on primarily marine resources, salmon, clams, crab, etc., that we still rely on today. So we had winter and summer villages throughout what's the Kitsap Peninsula and beyond. And this map shows some of our range. One thing to remember about Suquamish is that we did not have a major glacier-fed river. So we had to kind of expand beyond our winter villages out, radiating out to gather enough salmon and marine resources to support our villages. Chief Seattle signed the treaty for us in 1855. He was born in 1786. Saw Vancouver first come in 1792. The British explorer when he was 6 years old with his father, and then from there helped the tribe adapt to the new economy, the new way of life that was being introduced and or forced upon us, including missionaries, fur traders, and eventually the Americans who he signed the treaty with, established a reservation where he passed away in 1866 and is buried here in Suquamish. The Treaty of Point Elliott, signed between Chief Seattle and a number of other chiefs from other tribes, many other tribes, and Governor Stevens, was signed in Mukilteo in 1855. The Duwamish people the Indians of King County essentially were told they were to move to Port Madison to the Port Madison Indian Reservation, which a good portion of them did. Chief Seattle himself was identified as Suquamish. He had a Duwamish parent, Duwamish mother, and he had a Suquamish father. The mother was from a village on the White River. So the treaties, of course, are supreme law of the land in the Constitution. The Treaty of Point Elliott is the basis of our government-government relationship. And as cited in the treaty, All treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, which this was, shall be the supreme law of the land. And once it was signed by the parties, it needed to be ratified by Congress, which it was in 1859. So our relationship with the Congress is very strong and rooted in the Constitution. So here's a copy of the treaty that was on display in the Tulalip Tribes Museum. And as part of the treaty, we, in exchange for giving up our land that we'd occupied for thousands of years and lived on for thousands of years, we were reserved the lands of the Port Medicine Indian Reservation, and the government agreed to protect our fishing and hunting rights and also provide health, education, and welfare to us, and also protect our holdings. So we kept all of these and still fighting to keep these promises. So as a sovereign nation, we had signed a treaty as a sovereign with the United States. We have a unique relationship. So we as a tribe will see to the health, healing, education, housing of our people and protect our treaty rights, which we've inherited from our ancestors and pass on to the future generations. So once the treaty was signed, the assimilation started. The first thing that was done was they divided our land into allotments, and that was done around 1886. Around 51 allotments were established over time, beginning at that time, and gave it out to every head of household. And that was intended to get us out of Old Man House, out of the major village on the reservation, and separate it out into individual homes, and where we'd become farmers and forget our Indian ways. So shortly after that, around 1900, they forcibly placed us in the boarding schools, Tulalip. And so all the children were taken out of the, forcibly taken out of the village and sent off to boarding school. So that really created a real traumatic episode of our history, where all the kids were gone, and then they sort of came in and started trying to, well, they did pass laws to sell off our allotments to at auction to non-natives. So Indian Child Welfare Act was established in 1978 to kind of reverse some of this assimilation that had occurred starting in 1886 and moving up through the 1970s, because the Indian Reorganization Act was passed in 1934, which was an act to which basically admitted that the assimilation process had failed and they needed to empower tribal governments. So that started to happen. And the termination period started after World War II, where the Congress passed laws that would terminate tribes in exchange for them getting certain payments. And there were limited tribes were pressured into trying to do that. And then after that failed, this Indian Self-Determination Act was passed in the early 70s. And after that act was passed, which was a further empowerment of tribal governments, the issue of removal of Indian children from homes and placement in non-native families by primarily the state. The states were doing this as they ran the foster care system and the child welfare systems. They were very culturally insensitive. Oftentimes would look at a home and say, oh, this home is not, from their cultural lens, was not a healthy, nurturing American home. We need to save these children and move them out and place them in non-native homes where they have a chance to survive, rather than looking for other family members within the community. So this was so bad that the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed in 1978 to allow the tribes the authority to manage the foster care system in a way and provide funding to tribes to employ their own foster care workers to find appropriate places for children to live within their culture community. And one of the things that has happened and we're still suffering from is a lot of our a good portion of some of our people, I should say some of our people were relocated out of state, some as far away as Virginia and other states, and now are returning home, but they've been separated for us for a long time. So it's been exciting to see some of them come home. So as of yesterday, as you all know, was just announced, the Supreme Court upholds the Indian Child Welfare Act in a 7-2 decision. So we're very excited about this decision. It was, of course, a very tense time for us because of the forces behind this are pretty sinister in that they're trying to sever that congressional tribal relationship and also of course empower the adoption industry and empower non-natives to continue this practice of taking our children out of tribal settings and lessening the tribe's ability to be involved and engaged in this in the foster care activities and regulations and enforcement. So when you talk to the people who actually do this work, they support Indian Child Welfare, the Indian Child Welfare Act, because there's a shortage of foster care families. So from a practical purpose, they say we want the tribes involved because we want more opportunities to find placements. And so it's purely a political, sinister movement funded by the Goldwater Foundation Institute, I should say, Goldwater Institute. And it's just a great victory that we were able to get 7 justices in our favor. We knew that we probably had 4, with Justice Gorsuch being such a strong defender of treaty rights and tribal governments, tribal sovereignty, and also a student and a historian of that can be expressed in his opinion. That was a supplemented the majority opinion. So we knew we had 4. We were looking for 1 more. We weren't sure if it was going to be Barrett, Roberts, or Kavanaugh, but we got all 3. So we're really excited, very happy. So we've talked a lot about law enforcement and jurisdiction in the past, and of course the Oliphant decision happened right here in Suquamish in the 70s, where the Supreme Court ruled that we did not have criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians on a reservation to commit crimes on a reservation. So we've been pushing back on that forever. And of course, that affects all tribes across the nation. So this creates a jurisdictional gap that's exploited on the reservations by non-Indians, especially in the Midwest and the more isolated, more in the rural, I shouldn't say isolated, but rural areas. Where offenders know that there's jurisdictional challenges on the larger reservations and they can often get away with their crimes and not be prosecuted. So we're working really hard on the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Persons initiative to make sure that when American Indian women or people are reported missing, that it's taken seriously and not just considered from really what was a racist perspective that, oh, they're just American Indians, blah blah blah. They'll show up, or they're just out and about. They'll come back, and that wasn't the case. It's really a lot of missing. The rates and of missing and murdered Indigenous people was way off the charts, and law enforcement was not paying enough attention to it. So we're trying to educate people about the importance of getting rapid response to these things, and also kind of cut through some of the bias that occurs, that exists. So we've been working on our education. So when the treaty was signed a year later, the Indian agent visited our reservation. Chief Seattle was still alive. This was 1856. And when they visited the reservation, one of the first things Chief Seattle said was, "Where's our school?" because he really valued the importance of education to our people, and that was part of the treaty agreement and commitment by the federal government. So we've been very engaged with trying to stay active with our district and with the state and with different agencies about making sure that post-boarding school experiences are more positive. So the treaty, we really believe that the schools would be on the reservations. It'd be like schools that your students go to today. They come home every day after school. We didn't expect this to have this boarding school concept and institution established. So we are working really hard with state and also with OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and our local districts to make sure that curriculum's introduced that teaches students, our students, and the rest of the student body about tribal history, and then also recruiting Native teachers and making sure assessments are appropriately, culturally appropriate. So we do have a state compact school. So we have our Chief Kitsap Academy, which is grades 6 through 12. It's in the old art college on Highway 305 there. And we're really proud of our students and the pathways that they're doing. And we also have students that are in the district as well at Kingston High School or North Kitsap or the other Suquamish Elementary, of course, has a lot of our students. So we have treaty fishing rights. We're in constant battle to try to protect our right to harvest and manage our own fishery. And the Bolt decision in 1974 adjudicated our treaty rights as promised in the Treaty of Point Elliott. The state asserted that we can only fish on reservation, and it was quite obvious that our fishing rights extended beyond the reservation. So in 1974, Judge Bolt, that's coming up on our 50th anniversary, I believe, of that next year, we'll be celebrating. Not only recognized the right to harvest half the harvestable salmon, but also recognized us as co-managers, as the tribal government that had a right to co-manage the fishery. So on the left, there's our Gooey Duck Dive team, and on the right, you can see some of our salmon being baked. So a lot of what we do also as co-managers is also our right to protect the ecosystem. So the Supreme Court had a tie in a culverts case, which basically kept the Ninth Circuit decision that recognized our right to not only harvest, but also the state has an obligation to protect our waters from pollution, from degradation. And we're in the process of trying to not only improve spawning habitat, but all keep improve water quality, and also protect our beaches from docks, bulkheads, and other intrusions. So we have our enterprise board, the Port Medicine Enterprise Board. It's a separate board of 7 tribal members that oversee our casino, hotel, golf course, construction company, cannabis operation, etc. So they're very active and very visible, as you guys all know. So we're really working on trying to return the land that was lost during the allotment and land sale efforts. So we've been in the process of we're getting a lot of our property acquired. We did get Old Man House returned to us in 2005, which was about 100 years after it was condemned by the U.S. Army. So I talked about usual and custom fishing areas. This is a map showing roughly where our usual and custom fishing areas are. As a marine tribe, we traveled far and wide. And then after we lost Old Man House, these land sales were very aggressive, and they used tribal themes to try to sell the lots that had been acquired through these auctions. So you can see the checkerboarding here in the different colors. representing tribal owned and PME owned, which is essentially the same thing, and then a lottee owned. So I believe the yellow is like individual lottees that held on to their property, that managed to dodge the land auctions and the pressure to sell. And the green is the tribally owned, tribal government owned. And the blue is PME, and then everything else is non-Indian owned, or Washingtonian owned, I guess you could say. So we do a lot of government consultation as part of the basis. The treaty's the basis, and then we work it out from there to have government responsibilities and relationships with everywhere from the president to the mayor of Seattle to our local governments as well. All very important to our role as one of the family of governments and the oldest government. So our traditional ways are, of course, very important, and Canoe Journey is an expression of that. It has been a great part of our cultural resurgence for our youth and our elders. So we engaged a lot of legal action and lawsuits and other legal remedies that oftentimes result in settlements, because we try to stay out of court, as the other people that we sue try to stay out of court. We try to come to settlements when we can, and we were able to do this on the King County wastewater spill that happened during our Canoe Journey landing. So that turned out to result in an investment in by the county into trying to prevent future spills, and that's really what we want to see happen. So here's the ways that you can respect sovereignty and treaty rights. Recognize us as a sovereign and work with us on a government basis. Engage in transparent and early tribal consultation, and help us to achieve our goals. So you can visit the museum. Thanks for the plug. You can view the Port Madison dialogues on the Kitsap County's website. Go to our website, and we have public events, and we'll try to get to yours as well. So some things about respecting our traditions and resources. So support tribal artists, do our hospitality, understand when we're just kind of entertaining our neighboring tribes, but there's times where you can get engaged in that as well. Ask questions. So that's what we're here for. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope that's helpful, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing and turn it back to you, our fearless leader.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Forsman. That was extremely informative. I wanted to make one comment because several people have already asked, and that is that we are recording this, and the recording will be available on the league website, and we'd be happy for the tribe if you want. And this is for Sarah Van Gelder, who is in the background and the tribal communications director. If you want to post it on the tribe website, that should be fine, or at least a link to ours. So we'll talk about that later, but the recording will be available, and we encourage you to view it again. I have one question, and I'm sure there'll be some questions from the audience. Well, I have several, actually, of course. And one is, how did the COVID pandemic affect the tribe and the members?
Similarly to many, however, we were very how do I say this, sensitive to the threat of the pandemic, because we had been impacted by diseases in our history very early on. Even before Vancouver landed in 1792, smallpox had been very prevalent and had a huge impact on our people, and other diseases have had huge impacts on our people. So we had the oral history and the knowledge of the fact that we needed to take action. So we were very fortunate that we have a tribal member who has been running our emergency management team program for quite a few years. Sherry, and we had a established emergency operations team, and we just followed direction and tried to stay home and do our best to educate everybody about the necessary actions that need to be taken to stay safe, keep our elders safe, and keep our children safe, and keep everybody safe. We weren't perfect, but we managed to get just to avoid a lot of infection, and we were very eager to see the vaccine developed. And in our treaty, it actually has a request that a physician be provided and vaccinate our people. And it says vaccinate in the treaty itself in 1855. So the vaccination procedures back then were a little less scientific, I guess, than they are now. But we were getting inoculated, as they said, at the Hudson's Bay Company in 1840. So we had quite a long experience with this. So we were able to, fortunately have the resources to do that when we got the vaccines relatively early. And we're able to get those distributed quickly. And then, of course, we were fortunate to provide our teachers with local public school teachers with the vaccination early as well, so that they could get back to work safely.
Thank you. I have one other, I have, like I said, several questions. What are the challenges that the tribe considers most pressing right now? Maybe a couple that you're working on.
Well, I think climate change and impacts to our ecosystems. So not only climate change, but also the continued development that's occurring around us as this area grows, and trying to find ways to coexist and have a sustainable growth in this area is a real challenge. So wastewater treatment, stormwater treatment, establishing and maintaining buffers on rivers and streams, making sure we have clean water to allow for shellfish harvest. All these things are a threat that we continue to work on. So that's one big one. And then, of course, we put one aside for the time being with the Supreme Court decision yesterday. But those threats continue, legal threats continue to occur. So those are two of the major issues there that we have. And I think also housing and affordable housing, trying to find affordable housing for our people on the reservation here continues to be a challenge for us as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like all the local governments have some of the same challenges, including the tribal government. I'm going to ask my colleague from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Jeannie Allen, who is kind of in the background there, to take a look at the questions that have been asked by the audience. And Jeannie, could you share one or two of the questions one at a time?
Let me read one that has been posted. Do you expect an appeal of the Oliphant decision to reach the Supreme Court?
Oliphant. Is that the Oliphant decision?
Yeah. Well, there used to be a concept of settled law in the legal system, but I'm not a lawyer, but I know that I said, well, you can't appeal it, right? But there are ways to bring portions of the law and its implementation back to Supreme Court, and that's happened where we've had some wins and some losses on those jurisdictional cases. So there's a lot going on in Oklahoma. So I don't want to get too deep into that, but there are challenges and also I guess you'd call it initiatives that tribes are doing that get challenged, or vice versa. So it's interesting because some of these are challenges that are brought to the court by criminal defendants. So a criminal defendant will challenge their arrest and prosecution by the state and say, well, I shouldn't have been arrested and prosecuted by the state because I was on tribal land in Oklahoma, which has a different history than ours, and then challenge it. So that gets the tribes involved.
You do expect it could.
Yeah, well, in different ways. It's, this is not, it's not a law seminar, so I don't want to go there.
Sure.
But I would just say that the other thing is Congress has been addressing the Oliphant decision through the Violence Against Women Act and providing us opportunities to prosecute non-natives who commit crimes on the reservation related to domestic violence, and that in the Tribal Law and Order Act. So the Congress has been chipping away at it. Okay.
Thank you. Would you like me to read another question that has been sent to us prior to the seminar? How does the Suquamish tribe interact with the county, the cities of like Postbo and Bainbridge Island, the state and the federal government? Since the tribe is a sovereign nation, how are these relationships affected?
Well, we have a government-to-government relationship that's established. So when we work with other governments, it's on that basis. So there's a number of places where we have authority to protect primarily our treaty rights. So we often get into discussions with cities and counties over growth management, et cetera, and how they might affect our treaty resources. And that would be water quality, like I said before, salmon spawning, culverts, et cetera. So we have that right to try to get the local governments to comply. But we've actually, been more successful in implementing and working through the state laws. Oftentimes the Growth Management Act kind of has some of the same goals that we have as far as controlling sprawl and affecting density. So we're able to implement that. But that's kind of how we start. And then we do a lot of consultation, and then there's other places that we potentially would have some authority to bring local government to the table, and state government as well. And we have the Centennial Board as well with the Washington State, kind of guides our relationship with the governor's office and the agencies that the governor oversees. So we have an annual meeting under that as well, that we try to work things out before we have to potentially take legal action.
I'd like to ask one other question that's come in. It actually comes from a league member, Carolyn, and it's about the North Kitsap high school graduation and the Indigenous celebration that's part of that. As I understand, that is going to happen this year, and or did happen. We're close to that timeline of graduation. And is there anything that the surrounding community can continue to do to help support Indigenous students who are in the North Kitsap School District?
Well, I think it's important to ask school board members to make that a priority. And I think that, there's an election coming up, so maybe make sure that you ask those questions before you decide who to vote for. And that's helpful. And then also, I think this showing up for public comment, school board is important as well. And we are going to have that celebration is going to happen next week. And So we are glad that it's been, reinstated, and it's a annual event that's been going on for a long time, ceremony that's kind of expression of our, we go back to the treaty and the school, and it's the GCL asking for the school and all those things. We really rely on the local school district and the state to, provide and enter into and deliver that treaty promise as part of their responsibility that the federal government essentially has, I guess, unofficially delegated to them. Maybe officially, I don't know. It depends who you ask. I'm on tape here, so I got to be careful what I say.
Well, some of those things are never clear to any of us, but thank you for the plug about the North Kitsap School District elections coming up. As a league member, I have to say that we really believe that the local government elections are so important, and we hope everybody votes every year in all of the local elections. And we really enjoy hosting forums, and we will be hosting forums. Stay tuned. That information for the primaries, we have, I think at least 3 of the school districts have multiple candidates for district seats on the school boards. And so we will be hosting forums in July, and the league is happy to do that. And the public is always invited to those. So stay tuned for information about those in the future. Jeannie, was there another question that you noticed?
Yeah, that's another question that was sent in. Do the Suquamish have their own police department? How are the relationships with the county sheriff department and city police department?
Yes, we do have our own police force, and it's partially funded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and we pay for the rest of it through our own budget. And we've had police officers since the late 70s under this program, and important part of our maintaining law and order here on the reservation. And we provide public safety services to everybody who lives here. Of course, we focus on serving the tribal members, but we also want to make sure that our, people who are potentially arrested are given a fair trial and are treated in a fair way by our police and our court. So in the past, that wasn't necessarily always the case when we didn't have our police and our tribal members were arrested by outside agencies. But things have improved a lot. We've got an agreement with the county that kind of, I guess it addresses some of the issues brought up by the Oliphant decision. So we're able to arrest non-Indians now. And although they need to be tried in county court, we can testify in those cases and or have the same kind of standing as other governmental police forces do.
Thank you. There's a couple of audience questions. One that I don't know anything about, so I'm going to ask. It's from John, and he says, I understand that the tribe's efforts to protect marine habitats via legal action has been credited with the cleanup of Paulsbo in the 1990s and its status as the beautiful place that it is now. Is that the case, and can you describe some of that history?
Well, I think primarily I can just describe how when the Bolt decision in 1974, I mentioned, was relevant to the salmon industry. And so in the early 90s, we had the Rafiti decision, which addressed the shellfish issue. So fish are fish, right? So fish aren't just salmon, fish are also shellfish. And we were able to get that adjudicated. And so that's when there was issues around private property rights that were being brought into the case. And the judge was very, judge clearly recognized the treaty right, but he started having some issues around usual and custom harvest of clams on private lands. So he put in a remedy that the tribes would have to enter into agreements with the landowner to harvest the 50% of the clams in front of their waterfront home. So we started with Dyes Inlet and got that cleaned up, and we're able to start having these harvests more regularly on these private lands. And there's also some public lands that we do the same thing on. And so then we started to look at Liberty Bay and Pulsebo and working on trying to have the same program there, but the water quality wasn't appropriate. And so that's what, I would say appropriate is probably a funny word to use. It was basically decertified. The water was dirty, water was polluted. So local governments started to work together with the tribe and the state and trying to identify where the sources of the water pollution are, failing septics, livestock, et cetera, and try to eliminate those. Water gets tested, it's clean. Let's open it up for clam digging. So in that way, we did help with water quality in Liberty Bay. A team effort.
Well, that's good news.
Yes.
There's another question from Natalie that she talks about touring the Suquamish Seafoods recently.
Right.
And she learned about a monthly credit that elders receive there. And she was wondering if there are other food-related programs within the tribe or that are on the horizon in the future.
Yeah, we have a pretty robust traditional foods program, and one of our tribal members, she's very active in providing different opportunities for us to diversify our diet back and bring our diet back to a more traditional basis. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different types of traditional food preservation and acquisition and distribution. And then also we have our elders lunch program, and that provides food for elders, both that visit for the lunch itself and those that have it delivered when they can't get here. And we try to incorporate, of course, our traditional foods into that. So there's gooey duck chowder day, there's salmon day. So and so we try to do that as well.
And I'd like to add that sometimes all of us, whether we're tribal members or not, we're neighbors and we're invited to participate at a variety of events where traditional foods are available to the public. So I encourage people to participate. Chief Seattle Days is obviously one of the many opportunities for that. And that's one of the questions that was asked. I know this information is always available on the website when those things are occurring and when they're open to the public. I don't know if you or Sarah want to talk about this year's. I know there's a canoe journey welcome in July and the Chief Seattle Days in August. Do you want to say anything more about that now, you or Sarah?
Well, canoe journey is going to be landing here at the end of July, and we have a lot of people coming in from other tribes, and people are welcome to attend. It's not it's kind of a quasi-public, I guess, event. We don't kick anybody out, but we don't like advertise for people to mob us because we're bringing 8,000 people from the outside in. But we are looking for volunteers to help manage that. So that's one way. But just understand that we're pretty challenged with the group of people we have. So it's not an event where we're looking to serve the public like we are with Chief Seattle Days, which is, you're of course aggressively invited to that. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything to add. It's always a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I think the main thing is if you do come, try to be very respectful of the Longhouse. The House of Waking Culture only has capacity for a few hundred people, but there could be thousands of people visiting from other tribes all over the region. And this is kind of a good time for non-natives to kind of step back and see if we can be helpful through volunteering there is a form on our website for people who would like to volunteer to help out.
Yeah, and be patient because there'll be a lot of people here, and sometimes people get a little anxious. Somebody might park in front of their house. It's like, oh, if you could just be patient with us. It's a very important part of our cultural resurgence. And we have people from very diverse tribes. So, little tribes from Vancouver Islands, the First Nations people that have smaller canoe families and maybe traveling a little bit on a lesser budget than others, but very friendly and very, very eager to share their culture. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps a follow-up question on that particular topic with the canoe journeys. I know there are many issues that you deal with, particularly at the legislative and the court level sometimes, that might affect other tribes. And so we were wondering, one of the attendees asked how you coordinate with other tribes on an approach to some of these issues that cross tribal boundaries. What's the action there?
Okay. There's a lot of intertribal organizations. Some of them are read off in my bio. Affiliate Tribes and Northwest Indians and also the Washington Game Association are two of the major ones that a lot of the tribal leaders get together. And so we're able to use that as a forum for, getting information out and strategizing on the best way to support our respective initiatives. So those are two major places that we get together. And then also there's a Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, which is organization that has all the fishing tribes involved, and they get together to establish policy, and they also employ a number of professional positions to support gathering data from fisheries, science to media relations, to et cetera, et cetera. So they just kind of help the tribes as they, engage in not only co-management, which is trying to figure out what the salmon seasons are like. And there's these big meetings with states and the federal government getting together and trying to negotiate, when salmon will be fished and how heavily and how long. And then there's also the other side of that, which is trying to keep state agencies accountable for providing the efforts to manage and protect the ecosystem.
Yeah, I often think as a person concerned about climate change that we're wise to follow the lead of all the local tribes and across the country for that matter. They've certainly been managed the lands differently for generations, long before a lot of the current degradation results and impacts were felt. A number of people have asked questions about a couple of things. One is specific about marine mammals and the fact that they, of course, particularly the orcas, eat a lot of salmon. So there's a question about, are the marine mammals another facet of the approach toward keeping the salmon numbers up? Is that part of the tribal, I think the Northwest Fishing Commission in particular deals with that.
Well, they don't attend the meetings where they're divvying up the harvest. But they are fishermen like us. They're ancient.
Mm-hmm.
So it's complicated. But I served on the Orca Task Force, and the first priority for saving the southern resident killer whales is prey. They need food. So
Right.
tribes are pushing for more fish in the system. So I think the short term, obviously, solution is increasing hatchery production. So that's really where we're focused. And then also the, preserving habitat as well. So those are, the things that make it kind of a dynamic with us and the Orca kind of have the same priorities.
Mhm. Yeah, there's one really specific question. I have no idea if you'll know the answer to this one. It comes from Nikki, and it's about the plans to implement composting of food waste at the resort and the golf course. Are there any plans like that? As we know, food waste is a major contributor to climate change. So,
I'm not aware of it, but I know that it's a separate enterprise board. So I'm not the council liaison on that board. So I'll have to check in and see if there's any thought about that. But it is a good initiative that we should start considering. So I'll check into it.
thank you. Mhm. And we have another question from one of our league members. Catherine is asking if the school districts, particularly here in Kitsap, of course, are currently teaching the tribal history course required by the state.
I think we've had some mixed success with that. So some of it is, but we needed to be more, I think the school district can be more aggressive in implementation and working with teachers to do that. So there's a dynamic there between the district, the board, their district, and then the teachers that needs to, I think, be more aggressive in implementing that curriculum. And we also, as a tribe, are trying to develop more curriculum because the since time immemorial curriculum that was developed by the Office Superintendent of Public Instruction is kind of basic and kind of covers state as a whole and needs more local stories in it. So we're working on that. We're working on some kindergarten curriculum right now, and then we do have a junior high curriculum.
Excellent.
Yeah, I know. So there is efforts there, but it can always get better.
Yeah. Well, another collaborative effort locally is the comprehensive plan update. And Beverly is asking, how is the tribe involved in that comprehensive plan update, particularly, of course, the protection of the natural environment?
Well, we have our staff and our fisheries department, environmental division is engaged in that. And as part of the tech team there, and they have meetings monthly with the tribe and the other local governments working together on trying to make sure that the tribal priorities are addressed. And for the most part, we have a lot of success there, but it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of I wouldn't say I guess sometimes you have to compromise, but we try not to. But there's a lot of collaboration is probably the word I'm looking for, in trying to come out with things that are acceptable to all parties. So that's something we've been involved in and for decades. And one of the people that's got probably some of the most experience in this is actually here, I believe. So it's wonderful that Allison's sitting in on this as well.
Yes, I've been very impressed with the size of our attendance today. This is one of our better attended forums. I can imagine why. We've been at this an hour, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you've got other things going on this afternoon. So I'm going to close now and thank everyone for attending. I also want to emphasize again that this recording will be up and available of this dialogue, and including, of course, the presentation, which had a lot of background. And you might want to look at that part again, just because there was a lot of material covered there in a short period of time in his slide presentation. I also want to remind everyone that when we do forums, candidate forums, all the candidates are invited. Sometimes everybody can't make it. But we do encourage you to participate by sending in your questions. And we're going to be doing the forums for the primary on Zoom. So we'll be inviting people to send the questions ahead of time to the league. And I think there are some excellent questions that were asked today for school district board member candidates to consider. And I'm going to make sure that they get added to the list of questions that are submitted for our forums in the different school districts here in Kitsap County. So thank you very much, Chairman Forsman. And thank you, Sarah and Jeannie, for backing both of us up today. And thank everyone for attending. It looks like we had as many as almost 80 participants today. So that's really exciting. Thank you all.